Зачем Инна? Света придет сейчас. Маришка, скажи, пожалуйста, Светке, чтобы она потом принесла для Бори бумаги. Нет, она мне придет, чтобы Светка принесла бумаги, не отпустила.
Контракт, хорошо.
Да, потому что он ждет Инна, а Инна не придет.
Да, я скажу сейчас.
Все. Так. Значит, я... А как-то там галерки опустили. Это потому что им...
Okay. People left the back rows for some reason or other. I am here, although I also feel very hot. The task of this seminar to acquaint you with topics, problems, that's fine. But the thing is to acquaint you with accents, meaning the way you approach different topics. We have to modernize our approach through accents, through stresses. We also acquaint you all with different experts. Russia today has a special status which I personally don't like very much. But in Russia we have unique experts of the world level. Formerly, in the 90s, seminars mostly consisted of foreign experts. We thought that we would quickly get democratic, or we missed something from the Western thought. So 75% seminar contained of foreigners, or consisted of foreigners rather, and contained foreigners. But Russian experts today are one better than another. During these seminars, you will still see lots of brilliant experts from Russia. Now, we face, and I'm sure of that, and that's common knowledge, he is one of the best Russian political scientists, Boris Makarenko. His opinion on internal affairs is considered to be as something which you may refer to even inside your own thoughts. If you are interested in his topics and his views, observe him through the internet, look at his texts. He is invited to write all sorts of strategic reports and to come up with final assessment of what he thinks. And he thinks professionally and morally. So you should read him. He somehow lived in the West, in the United States of America, and his analysis is rather of a rigorous, modern, Western thought. And all his words are quite precise. You do not need to read 500 pages to understand a brief idea. In his case, it is straightforward, clear, and precise. Boris, you are welcome. Lena presentations, well, make me impossible to speak up because I have to live up to it. I will start with some recollections. 20 years ago, in July '94, I came at this building for the first time. It I think it was the second year of the school's life. Of course, memory holds a lot, and there were different people who are sitting here. Now they are on the different sides of the barricade. For instance, there was Vladimir Ryzhkov. Next to him, there was someone who was among the first who was sanctioned now by Americans and Europeans, Evgeny Bushmin, and other graduates. The only constant, like in '93, Ivan Starikov participated in election in Siberia, and he still participates in the election campaign now. So I'm not sure that he will take more than the second place. So Ryzhkov and Bushmin in this audience. There was another lady, but she was not sanctioned. She developed in Russia the system of federal treasury. Anyway, so this is a sort of a fork. I, well, cannot say how many conferences I participated at now. And all these conferences were named Russia at the crossroads. So this crossroad is over. And, well, we can put an end to my presentation here. The crossroad is over. What crossroad is over? Before the Ukrainian crisis and the Crimea, it seemed that Russia still has a choice between attempt to save the country and make it develop in a modern way and saving the regime. So now we have made our choice. We have to save the second. And modernization scenario for Russia now is closed. Modernization. I've been working at the Institute of Modern Development, headed by Medvedev, and we dealt with modernization. Now the word modernization is not used any longer, but the problem of modernization is still on the agenda. It's not just instruments. They are important because they are made by people and they are used by people. And in the long run, we have a values revolution. I'll tell you later why it is so, but Medvedev set the task which was proper, but we failed to move forward far. And we thought that that's after upheavals of 2011-2012, our system started changing, and not everything is lost, of course, but in 2012 and 2013, there were some movement in both directions. This time is over. Consequences of the Crimean and Ukrainian crisis make me say these words. I am not an economist. Economic growth may end up in stagnation. The capital flows away. Ruble falls down. The state management is worse. Relationships with the West grow worse. And with this kind of economy and such prospects, even technological modernization has no financial supports and no other backing. You'll say that the Soviet Union, surrounded by Western countries, managed to modernize itself. Yes, but the imperialist Russia was modernized with the help of the West on French money, using Belgian technologies. Russia was going up, and there were no political barriers. In the Soviet Russia, the West didn't help. And actually, the West helped Russia to come up with technological breakthrough 2 times. And the situation was awful for the West. After the Great Depression of 1929, and after the great jump of oil prices in the end of the 70s, Now, confrontation with the West strengthens the reactional trends and protective trends. Yesterday it was called a conservative wave. Now it is a reaction. And the authorities do not speak about reforms, education, and so on. We don't use these words any longer. Now we talk, we don't need this kind of knowledge. We know how to do. But what is the purpose, what is the target for tomorrow? Can we move forward without any target? There was a federal law recently on strategic planning, and each year this kind of reports on strategic planning would appear. Reports would be there, but no strategic planning, because it is done by politicians and in their minds. Now, growing disillusionment by people will be compensated by increased patriotism, and all other values and points of view will be marginalized. Well, numerous regimes built vertically who find themselves the entity, meaning they have a brain, and the rest, companies, people, and so on, are just limbs. And this is the concept formulated by Benito Mussolini. On such concepts, Southern Korea and Taiwan grew up, but the authoritative modernization is also closed for our country because, well, they have their own goals, rob the village and build up industry in towns and occupy corresponding place at the world market. We robbed our villages 80 years ago in time of Stalin. We do not plan to make many plants and factories. So the Crimea factor, whatever happened after the Crimea, it's not something that fell out of the blue. It was actually in line with the existing trend. What I was talking to you about existed a year ago and 2 years ago. At that time, it was not that rigorous, but that's what it's becoming now. And post-Crimea situation increased all the risks for the country. That is why the authorities operate in the existing instinct for about 100 years ago. I want to recall you that all this goes throughout the country. I'm not telling this for the first time. So the authorities know what to do, and all other elements are minor, and they attempt to modernize for the army to be modern. So you need military industry, and people should be more educated. And that was the end of all our modernizations. We get back to the same logics, and all these modernizations do not create any new subject of policy and economy, a new man. But without a free man in the 21st century, you cannot make your country modern. I will quote now Vasily Ключевский, and that's what he wrote about Nicholas I. His task was not to change anything, not to introduce any new, but support the existing order, filling the gaps and making small repairs without any participation of the society. And Nicholas died in time of the shameful Crimea war. Now the authorities think that the Crimean factor resolved its problem. It did for a second, but what will happen in the future, we cannot say, but it's not too cheerful. All the sicknesses of the Russian regime are well known. It's all sorts of diseases, fallen efficiency, erosion of legitimacy, inability to be consistent. Legitimacy is the key concept. It's not a law. It's rather political concept. Legitimacy has two chief components. It's just what people think about the authorities, whether authorities can follow the society interest, performance legitimacy. That's what is important. And in this regard, a Russian political regime didn't feel too good. Ratings went down, public optimism went down. All this was not ripe with political upheavals, and the explosion of 2011 or 2012 was for a different reason, because people felt insulted. But this legitimacy was falling down, and hopes for improvement were not there at all. And the Russian authorities cannot be efficient because policy is separated from economy in our country, which is not the case anywhere else. Who deals with politics here? Presidential administration, corresponding structure at the governor's level. They deal with election, public space, mass media, ratings. As to economy and social side, that's the government, roads, medicine, education, and so also a clerk in these bodies does not do what a normal clerk does in any other country. He doesn't know how his actions will be taken by the population. Monetization of benefits, unification of schools. They don't deal with politics, they deal with economy. Remember a phrase, I'm not a politician, I am an economist, although politically he distributes resources and secures boons for people. So efficiency of power of authorities was not there. Institutional reforms in Russian agenda were too small. I can't tell you how Russians try to increase the rating of Russia from place 120 to place 20. In the end of 2013, there was a big session, and the three poor indicators were there. We used this rating because it was not politicized, but electricity, permission for construction, custom barriers, and so on. It is still all political because it's institutional. You cannot resolve a problem of Russia if the rating for permission for construction is last but one. It's like in Bangladesh. We failed to break cooperative mechanism which worked in this sphere. Actually, in the area of electricity, there was a political will, and Russia jumped up for about 40 points. And as to permissions for construction, it is still bad. And with customs, nothing was done. And we cannot make institutional transformation, and institutes grow worse. So the checks of non-commercial organizations is tougher than any commercial company. So if you want to make charity, do make a commercial enterprise. You would be able to do the same, but you will be checked less. The second component of legitimacy is symbolic leadership, whether people think that their leader is proper as a leader. In Russia, it was not so well in the past as well. The majority of people, including those who believe power, there was a poll organized by our center, held by Levada Center. So we asked what institutions and practices people miss. So the four first positions: not democracy, not freedom of speech, absolute consensus, 4 items: equality against the law, independent court, honest elections, and responsibility of power to people. That's what we really miss. Lev Gudkov says this is the adjustment to the wrong power. And the leadership was symbolic. People believed in their leader and they followed him. But after Crimea, it all reached the heights, ratings of trust up to 80%. United Russia also the situation was reversed because it was not popular in the recent past. Now, actually, United Russia lost its rating within the recent years, but now again, United Russia is close to Putin in the ratings. It follows him behind. A year ago, what would you like in 2018? That was the question. People said not Putin, and only 1/4 said Putin. Now the proportion is different. Symbolic legitimacy raised to be united around your flag. And actually, sociologists say that this situation would not be for long. People say that they're satisfied with what the authorities do, and social and economic it is. So that's about our post-crimea political system. There was a certain contradiction, and authorities tried to retain control over everything it could control, but understanding the inefficiency of the former political system, it tried to make it more flexible from complete domination to move to some tricky manipulation. This line is still there, although it fell back. Objectively speaking, current situation does not need anything to strengthen authoritarianism. Ratings are about 80%. Opposition is annihilated, and there are no specific figures capable of taking anything. We do not need to prohibit parties now. Why should we prohibit LDPR? Why should we prohibit Spravedlivaya Россия? See how they vote in Duma. You may find differences, but they are absolutely small. There were some differences when the vote was taken over local self-governance. And that was the only case where 3 opposition parties voted against the United Russia, but still it didn't help. It's convenient for regime, and it is in line with the principles of neo-corporate state. there were 4 other parties in the German Democratic Republic, if you remember. Angela Merkel came out of one of them. And in China, there are 4 other parties, but the Communist Party. So we are moving towards this popular front. That's how you call such structures. So to retain control over the system, you need a rigorous control over the Duma opposition parties. Now, authorities are not afraid of those who is in Duma. They're afraid of someone who is outside Duma. So in Duma they need a full-scale control, and the other parties are hushed up, and they are supposed to have similar views with United Russia. And there is similarity of views on the Ukraine, for instance, and opposition leaders are more patriotic than, or more rather Catholic than the Pope of Rome. And they feel threatened because the authorities try to settle all items of agenda. Although liberals are outside of this field, the most conservative, the most popular, the most paternalistic, the most patriotic, that's the party of power. Against this background, it's difficult to do something by other parties. There is a joke that in 2016, at the last session of Duma, one deputy, when he recognized that there is nothing to prohibit any longer, he hit the dog. This is the complete loss of the party system. But for this kind of behavior, these parties would get their share of votes because they're quite convenient for the authorities. So this is control over all items of agenda. Now, new barriers for political competition. A municipal filter at the governor's election worked even better. There was no competition at all. In the regions, the right to register candidates without collecting signatures is allowed only for the parties which have deputies who are already in local Duma. In 2012, the authorities declared an innovation. They understood that the old system does not work. Let new parties be introduced, and they will be lively. But this strategy does not work any longer. Now, increased pluralism, but at the same time, no alternative is allowed. People are not happy about absence of competition during elections. Okay, make your noise. There are 70 parties. In 2013, at the elections, United Russia lost 19 items. But do we have strong opposition? No. 3 parties of the opposition received the same amount of votes as one cycled back. So what happened to these 19%? They were lost between the new parties. There were about 20 of them, but they did not win at all. So such parties are useful for the authorities, but they do not create anything new. They do not create any alternative for the authorities. There is no need to prohibit anything under such circumstances. I
have no time left to discuss what is going on in other spheres. About the party United Russia. The party is renovating itself. Primaries have become more vivid, sort of, because they understand that they have to vote to go for election at the single mandate districts, and the deputy corps that is here is not always capable of that. What is going on in the election in Moscow? We now have more people who are more capable of dealing with the voters. The second thing that happens to United Russia, it stopped being an eight-party government. It used to be the case if you counted upon a career, upon an elected post, you had to go through membership in United Russia. Nowadays, I'm slightly exaggerating, it doesn't really matter under which flag a person comes into government, if they know that this person is loyal and will be capable to reach agreements. As to how things, party of government, will go to the next election, we shall see the Popular Front and how they will combine with the flag of United Russia. Well, somehow it will work. They will work it out, and we will see many independent. And in the 7th Duma, we shall see some analog of the Russian regions group that will be cooperating with the party in government. And very often the opposition thinks it is something as a deceit from the party of government to maintain majority under another flag, but it's not quite so. A person from a single mandate district is connected to municipal interests, to his sponsors, to his governor, and most exciting, he depends upon his voters who elect him. Every time he presses the button in the Duma, in 5 years he will face re-election, and the voters will get a printout how he voted at each question. This is what today's deputies do not care about at all. And the center and the regions, a very important measurement, because contradictions between the center and the regions is central in any political system, and it is far more important than the right and the left. The trend is continuing where we see governors' independence is getting weaker because of the financial reasons. The total debt of the regions has reached unimaginable heights, and in this situation any governor will be like an angel with the center. There will be no front from because we have few substitute entities that are donors, and they also depend strongly upon the federal budget. For that, the governor is getting a very nice compensation, like elimination of mayors of big cities. Finally, the amendment to the law on local self-government has become less rigid formally. They allow for 4 models how the governor can establish greater control over the local self-government. We cannot doubt that where the governor feels a threat, he will use a model which excludes the fact that mayors can be elected and cities will be disregarded as major centres. What does it mean putting the local self-government to the district level? The city disappears as a constituent entity, as a parliament. This is where the only municipal parliament can adopt a budget, and the governor cannot get into this budget because it's not his province, sort of. And it's not his. But as with the new model, it will be much easier for the governor. This is the compensation the governors received for being accountable before the centre. Remember how back in the 1990s the federal centre played governors against the mayors and the other way around. Now the centre doesn't need that because it has enough leverage to control it. Civil society, this is where we see the most unpleasant and rigid changes in the political regime, the most rough handling, and because whatever I've been saying before, the parties, the deputies, local self-government, governors, all this is centralized institutions where if you just adjust the leverage, a couple of levers, and it works. Civil society is built along other lines. There is no one single instrument that can subordinate it to you. Another fear entertained in the Velvet Revolutions and other resolutions, much is being said about it, but they're saying that this is, well, like any Velvet Color Revolution is paid from the State Department. I won't even mention it. There is another aspect to it, that civil society, as it goes out into streets through color revolution, overthrows the government. It's not really the case, as political scientists say it. I've asked the greatest authority on velvet authorities, Adam Przeworsky, American political scientist. His answer is no, it's not civil society that overthrows government. Civil society, as they go out in the streets, say that the king is naked, the government is illegitimate, and then elites split and they depose the former government. But that there is a certain actor, there is a certain collective actor that can say the king is naked and shut down this. It's very hard to shut up this actor, and this is what matters more than the regional position. So this is where we see foreign agents, this is where we see tougher inspections, this is where conservative attack that is being announced, the freedoms of democracy and freedom, something that is alien to Russia. What is its soft power, and what soft power is handled by these ideas? Our government sort of agrees but doesn't quite understand what to do about it. So just in case, they try to screw the nuts as hard as they can. Most important is that they stopped the channel of possible modernization, and this is the prospect. What is more concrete? To freeze bureaucratic authoritarianism. This is something that was described by Argentinian political scientist as he exemplified in Brazil and Argentina of the 1970s. To suppress a society that is so well educated, urbanized, adult and independent, as this was done by authoritarian leaders, this is impossible. So these societies are selected sort of in a selective manner. And you don't need to put the pressure on all. Put the pressure on those who have posed the greatest dangers. They are those who can think independently. So we have a communist party, we have something like a social democratic party, there is a populist and others, but there is no liberal party, because this is where middle class could go for that, and middle class are people who are independent, they're very hard to govern, and they have their own resources. Why not? Well, at least half of the blame, maybe 60% of the blame, I would lay on those politicians who work in this field. The chronicle of the mistakes will take, I'm afraid it will take to eat up too much parchment, and I don't think we have enough to put it on the scrolls of history. But another aspect of this is that pinpointed action against somebody by the government in this sector, this is where the government paid maximum effort so that nothing viable should come out of it. Whatever is going on about civic platform, for me this is a medical study, but I cannot say that I've reached some diagnosis yet. Not sort of all lab findings have reached me as a doctor, metaphorically speaking, but in authoritarianism, O'Donnell always plays with a model. The regime every time looks at what it is easier for it to suppress this opposition or just come to terms with it. And when they suppress it, then we see juntas. Then we can allow them in government when it's too expensive to put the pressure upon them. In Russia, this bifurcation point was not certain for a while, but after the Crimea, certainly it's cheaper for the government to put the pressure on the opposition rather than come to terms with it. Joel Hellman, political scientist, explained it, where the elite has monopolized, Russia is too big a country, has monopolized a huge share of political and economic resources, and is built like a pyramid, like a mountain king of the mountain, would not allow anybody to get on top of this mountain. And this is spoiling institutions. He doesn't allow any institution to become strong enough to challenge this king of the mountain. This situation has evolved before, but it's now being fixed. And thirdly, further deterioration of governance quality and exponentially increased risk of poor decisions, wrong decisions, and implementation. The more close this regime is, the less it is susceptible to hear and listen to what is going on under it, the higher the price of decisions, the higher the risk of mistakes. The main danger lies here in all these regimes in them being too focused upon government, upon their rule, and if the decision is taken, they will make it 100%. And if it's a wrong decision, that the damage due to this wrong decision would be too bad. To forecast the prospects of this regime, it's very hard because it's a sort of shut-down regime. There's nothing, no information goes out. The risk of split among elites, this is what the government fear, and I do not know what to expect of our elites split and break up, but it's hard to predict it. God knows how many cracks are within the pyramid of Cheops. Nobody can get within and look, but it looks like a monolith as we look from the desert, but we shouldn't overestimate this risk. I heard this opinion that now they forbade to officials to own property abroad, to travel abroad, and now they will rebel against. No, they won't. Government officials belong to a certain layer of this pyramid of government, and they hope to move up from the layer they take, to go 5 to 10 steps up. The conditions of its loyalty that helps them. Yes, you have to pay somewhat higher price for this. It's less depreciation costs, sort of. But since you're keen to move up, so for the foreseeable future, we won't see any splits, any breaking up elites. I don't want to discuss catastrophic scenario. Thank you very much for your attention. I want to end on a positive note. I don't want to discuss the catastrophic scenario. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, you can now start the conversation with Boris. Who was it in the second row? Please, you are the first to open the Q&A session. Artur Rudaku from Rostov-on-the-Don. Could you please deliberate on factors that make this corporate states more sustainable and stable? Because it looks very much sustainable in our situation. Which are the factors of stability and sustainability? Indeed, it is sustainable and stable. And people who refer to stability, they say people do not rebel on socioeconomic reasons. And this seemingly is true. I'll tell you two things here. First, because of the fact that these regimes are so closed to the public, who knows what is their limit? Who knows that, say, in Tunisia, it was enough for the police to confiscate one cart with fruit, probably worth 50 rubles, $50, that he committed suicide and the country rebelled and the regime was overthrown. Who knows? Who knew? Secondly, economic factors that they don't work to undermine the regime. First of all, this contradiction between two pillars of legitimacy is now sort of thinned out. We do not see it. It will be back, I don't know, in a year or two, because these two pillars are moving further and further away from each other. Secondly, socioeconomic stability and welfare. This is the most important anchor of a regime. Anybody would think twice before they decide whether they should rebel if they have got something to lose, be it their jobs, education, land, house. In our country, in 1970, 1991, most of our population didn't have socioeconomic reasons to wish these regimes to continue to exist. This is also another risk, another danger for stability of this regime. St. Pete, Philip Corbett from St. Petersburg. Anybody more or less decent and educated person understands and sees these things which you described so well in your presentation. These changes that are needed to take place, they should evolved from society and from NGOs too. And I want to say that democracy originally in ancient Greece, amongst other things, was an homogeneous society. I mean, don't mean absence of opposition. I mean more or less an equal level of political culture. This is where I want to ask you, could it be that a certain discord in the participation in political culture and political life of Russia, of the southern areas, districts of Russia? I mean, don't they really put the brake on the development of democracy? I mentioned that in 2011 the level was just 70% people voted for United Russia there, and the economy almost 70% deficit in those regions. And I want to hear your opinion. Could it be that democratic opposition, could they just cooperate with these moderate nationalist forces? And is there this possibility to cooperate with them? And if not, which form of struggle, which possible cooperation could be to change their situation? It seemed to me that you posed more than one question as to democracy being born in homogeneous society. That is truly so. Guelphs and Ghibellines and middle-aged Florence, gentlemen Whig and gentlemen Tories, agreed they would fight following the gentleman's boxing and not use any clubs. God forbid not allow peasants close anywhere closed. But then when Parliament evolved and its own rules of competition, then they allowed and gave suffrage to others. It's excellent how this model is worked, but it's already used, and we have a mass of societies that are far more heterogeneous than Russia, far more internal showdown, but with lower level of socioeconomic development, which still evolved democracy. If, say, 25 years ago, 1994, if anybody had ever told me in July 1994, you know that by early 21st century, Mongolia and Moldavia will be democracies and Russia and Belarus will not, people will burst out laughing here, would have burst out laughing. So it's not about this, and it is so. This is today's reality. Why is it that, say, if I had another hour, I could give an answer as to who you can cooperate with? Well, let me first finish my first thought. There are ways in political science that have been described and advised by political scientists and used in democratization processes in many countries that allow to sort of lower the acute character of contradictions existing in society. As to cooperation with nationalists, well, okay, it seems to you that liberals are weak and are good for nothing and nationalists are strong. Where did you see strong nationalists in Russia? Those who in Berilova writed, but they would write against anybody, be it the left, the right, who cares? And nationalists, in terms of their possibility how to quarrel with anybody because of tiny difference, they would be even worse than liberals. So far, Russia, the only thing that nationalistic worked was synthesis of nationalism with right populism named after Vladimir Wolfovich Zhirinovsky. And while this synthesis worked, and his political health and physical health allows him to be politically active, you can't sort of go by without, you can't really overtake him. Liberals can fight because of anything. Remember, like Moscow liberals fought whether they should or should not support Navalny at last year's election. Just in point of fact, the path to democratization goes through finding it such a way that in centrist elite they will be allowed to be enemies in a civilized manner from within. And we are nowhere capable of that other than other nations who went further away and overtook us on the path to democratization. Remember, when we had governor's election, almost every fourth governor would lose their election. And it was not because of a disaster. We can very well do it. It's right now, if accidentally the opposition mayor wins the election, then you can expect that they are already preparing a cell in the local prison for him, and they will start criminal investigation against him. Can I give you explanation, probably? Well, my question, what I meant is certainly not the marginals from nationalists whom you're referring to, who, like, say, would be writing in the Birulova. What I meant is creating of the national state, not in Westphalian system, but national unitary state movement for understanding which nation, which country want to live with whom and build their own future with. Again, go back to what was said before, the right of nations for self-determination. If you remember, Czechoslovakia was quite peaceful in splitting up. Czechs and Slovaks split quite peacefully, and probably that was the right step to take, what I'm driving at. Although the law that has been, I know I can be jailed for these, for hinting on separatism. Yes, you have to be very cautious, because this is where I'm going to interrupt you. This movement for unitary Russian state, for referenda, could it be one of the ways out which could bring together political forces, not certainly marginals, that exist among other things in the State Duma, I mean Vladimir Zhirinovsky, and those who write, but I mean political base. Unitary state, what do you mean? To abolish federative principles? No. No. Support referenda across every region. I'm sorry, if either you understand the question or not, but when you talk, all the two of us, I dislike it. I feel I do not belong here, very much like most present here. Philip, please be brief. You're like Salman Rushdie, God forbid, who, you know, has a novel, a Florentine Chermis, where every chapter begins with the words that ended the previous chapter. This is certainly beautiful, but it's so long. One can really get confused about it. Are we going any further? If you don't want to respond to what was being said, then we continue. Well, to take away federalist foundations of our country, look, we have moved far. I think it was a catastrophic mistake, and the only big country that is not a federation, this is China. China, all the other remaining big in terms of landmass are federations. Otherwise, it's too hard to govern them. Secondly, to think that in Russia we shall be all happy if we get rid or cut away or let's secede all those lands where mostly non-Russians, ethnic Russians. It's not only way into nowhere. It's horrors of Yugoslav war. They will think like kindergarten tales. So I'm flatly, categorically against, and I urge you, anybody in this room, not even to think in these terms. Marina, please. Marina Ilyushenko from Khabarovsk region. I was interested to find out what you think about this phenomenon. Federal law on local self-government, I'll put it in this brief name, was adopted, Law 131, was adopted in 2003. Since then, if I'm not mistaken, it has been amended several times. It has received either 80 or 100 amendments. Originally, when the law was adopted, they were judging by the fact that they could create a certain legal field where local education could work. To which extent this law is effective? Does it really help? Does it really help local self-government? Because I'm prone to think that we live in cities, in villages, but we don't live in federal districts or huge regions. So it would be interesting for me to hear what you'd say on this. Thank you. Well, adoption of Law 131 back in 2003, this law came into full effect in 2008 only. There was a long transition time, and I fear that the number of amendments that since then have been adopted is even greater than what you gave us, but nobody would be able to give the exact figure. At that time, it was quite an absolutely right step to take, and it introduced uniform principles. As always, Russian federalism, here in the presence of Andrei Zafarov, I fear to tread into these waters, but it's universalistically rigid. It dislikes local specificity to a great extent than it's disliked by other kinds of federalism. But there is a certain logic behind it. To a certain extent, it's good. What was not enough in this law, it was somewhat flexibility in this law 131 to take into consideration the differences between different regions and cities, regional, ethnic, political and cultural. Its main shortcoming was that it worked better for rural areas and small towns, and it ill-worked for cities. And it didn't work for mega cities. There was no fundamentals of the legislative framework to do things like what we call urban agglomerations. They grow naturally when any city, the suburbs merged with it, actually, but administratively it doesn't really, it's not reflected in administrative division. But this law was feasible, was viable. There were many shortcomings, but this reform, it's actually in its own way addresses these issues. First, the biggest shortcoming is when the law was adopted, it was meant that the budget code and inter-budget relations will be tied to the competencies which were left as something that local self-government had to take care of. The process was they wanted top-down to give away as many rights as they could, but to take away to the top as much money as they could. How could this law work? Our colleagues back in 2009 ran a huge study about how this law worked, and we realized that it worked. And the main principle is there. It's a single principle that it was confirmed by empiric studies in 2012. On 12 to 16 constituent entities where people locally ready to work in local self-government, where they would adopt the rules of this law and would be guided by them, then it worked. In those places where people in local self-government remained passive or already overexpressed by the top government, they would find a great number of objective contradictions and collisions between this law, and they would not work with it. Like everywhere in Russia, active people, even given our legislation under our conditions, live, work and act. So
first, why we needed the new model is, authorities of local municipalities were not supported by financial provisions, and from our report it also comes out that the second level self-governance municipalities couldn't work on with that law at all. So the law was workable but needed some amendments. So Law 136 didn't mean any problems for localities, municipalities, but for the cities it was a problem, and points of growth are always in urban settlements. I'm Nail Baramfov from the city of Ufa. Speaking of Federal Law 136, in Bashkortostan we are always ahead of the time, and we applied that model back in 2006, and city manager elected by the council, and the chairman of the council is not very much authoritative, while the city manager is. So those standards, those norms on municipal self-governance led to the situation that municipal power became just an extension of the original one. So, let alone heads of administrations and heads of key departments, all their appointments are coordinated with the administration of the president of Bashkortostan. But my question is not about that. Earlier, there was a very clear separation and demarcation between the federal elections that are overseen and supervised from Moscow, while regional elections were organized by regional authorities and local elections too. But now the trend is that, and we saw that trend in the Orlov and in the Bashkortostan Republic, that federal power helps regional governors to withdraw some candidates even before filters work. How can we explain that? If I had more time, I would speak about that longer, but from that draft that is going to be published in the next version, next issue of Pro and Contra magazine, I'm quoting Mr. Chimchenko, who is the head of the Committee on Local Self-Government in the State Duma. And the latter, the gentleman, commented on the law in very frank way. The situation that was the de facto, that existed de facto, was formatted into some legal form. So thank you very much for just commenting on the situation that existed in Bashkortostan in 2006. Now the situation will be already de jure. And then I would like to expose myself, and then the draft that is going to be published reads that that model may not be applied at all. And the model of full subordination of the municipal power to the regional authorities, that model will not be adopted. And it can be adopted in a more pluralistic region with more than one economic centers, or where the political culture is more sophisticated. And the Moscow region meets all the requirements, since it's more liberal compared to most of the subjects of the Russian Federation. And it is decentralized, there's no capital. So from that perspective, that tough model will not be applied, or cannot be applied in Moscow region. But what we can see in practice, the Moscow region was the first to apply the model and abolished direct election of mayors in most of the towns. Lord forgive them, they don't know what they are doing. The conflict is addressed, but if something happens tomorrow, there will be maximum risks of losing the control. So the governor will not be able to see control the situation in localities, as what my lecture is about. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Boris, be ready to receive a question.
Bosnia and Herzegovina, Ruden.
I'm Blaženka Kosneva from Bosnia and Herzegovina. My question is as follows. What method can be used from your perspective so that to enhance and improve the legitimacy of the current Russian power and authorities? Oh God, I have all the notes with me. Let me find one. It's about the public opinion polls. Equality of citizens before the law, independent judiciary, accountability of power to citizens. Ukraine, please. Miss, ask a question. I'm Anna Matikhina from Ukraine. Thank you very much for the most interesting report. Just a short comment. The party of power, no matter what flag candidate carries, the thing that matters is what flag he is carrying. You referred to the Yaroslav elections, and I think the party in power or of power was about to give up any mentioning in the materials of any symbols or logos of the party. So they were prepared even to accept that. But my question is about a different thing. The technology of election campaigns in the United States differs very much from that in Ukraine or Russia. I wonder if in Russia or Ukraine the technology can be successful. Can it be applied, or voters are not prepared for that? What technology are you talking about? In Russia or Ukraine, we try to talk voters into voting for us. But in the United States, voters are people are prepared even to pay for some campaign materials so that they could even donate the election campaigns and their candidates. And you are from Ukraine, and so since the time the son of the Kiev prince founded the city of Yaroslavl, you are interested in what's going on in that city. No, I just monitored the events in Yaroslavl, and you mentioned the name of the then mayor, and you know about that situation that has not been fully resolved. So that's sorry for some deviation, but the first international forum in Yaroslavl that was held by then President Medvedev, and a Brit was talking there. He was a lord, and that lord once had very high positions. And he congratulated on the citizens of Yaroslavl all the millennium since the son of the Ukrainian prince founded Yaroslavl, but he was corrected that the then Prince of Kiev was first Prince of Novgorod. And differences are much deeper between US and Russian and Ukrainian systems. But the public agreement, the public contract in the United States is different, and they make people there make a contract, virtual or written contract with the power, and they are prepared to invest in that contract. They are prepared to volunteer for some campaign activities or sign checks. I remember the times when people were sending their money both to Obama and Clinton, so that the two candidates, so that they had equal conditions, and that's the civic behavior, the behavior of citizens and not subjects. In Russia, when TV channel Dost was banned from broadcasting on cable TV, people began paying for subscription at high rates to that TV channel. That's kind of a civil behavior. People are prepared to invest in media that they like, because they believe they defend their positions, and professionalism of that kind of channels quite higher. But I can think of very few examples, and those that I referred to does not belong to elections. Great excitation in the room. What shall I do? Vadim, your question, please. Thank you. I'm Vadim Korostilov. And my question is about the strength of power. You know, today, Lech Walesa said that Putin will have to give up the Crimea. Last week, the Spiegel give it to whom? To Poland? To Ukraine? Why was it Lech Walesa? It was just a clarification. So the Spiegel magazine, referring to intelligence, German intelligence, reported last week that there was some split between Russian elites. So my question is as follows. The strength of power before Crimea was much stronger, I think, since the elites were in agreement, and they enjoyed some bonuses such as offshore economy, offshore banking, division of business, making business abroad, sending their children and kids and families to live abroad. But now, law enforcement officers cannot travel abroad. Their international passports are kept in metal boxes in the offices of their ministries. It concerns Prosecutor General's office and the police. So sooner or later have to bring their money back to Russia. There are sanction lists prohibiting issuing visas to certain individuals. Sorry for interruption. Things that are told in so many details I can refer to in one phrase. For some elites, transactional costs will be higher to stay in the elite. Can you think of any other arguments? You see, I think that a post-Crimea construct and framework is becoming stronger, but it's more vulnerable just in one point, because it's based not on the strength of elites as a fortress, but on the strength of a single brick. Since President Putin said he had taken a decision on the Crimea alone, solely. Yes, he turned to the Council of Federation then, but still. So my question is about the strength of that construct, the vulnerability of that construct following the acquisition of the Crimea. I think I was lecturing for about an hour to you about that. Let's start with the Crimea again. Even the advertising of Viagra for the poor ends with a phrase of "I'm going to the Crimea." It shocked me, really. Then the advertisement says that that there is a girl, and she says, "I'm happy with you, but I want to go to the Crimea." I'm short of fantasy, and I'm short of imagination to tell you how the Crimea can be separated from Russia again. And it's not possible without another referendum. And it's hard for me to imagine that if there is a referendum, the population of the Crimea will vote for any other option but to stay with Russia. So I don't think that those speculations are instrumental. As for the strength of the elite, we understand what arguments are, and in an elite, their stance, their approaches cannot be unanimous. And Lena, may I refer to Ernst Hilmer as one of the founders of the school, a greatest thinker. And, to my regret, he has passed away in a way. The logic, it's about the logic of a merchant and the logic of a warrior. For a warrior, honor is the main thing, not the money. If a warrior, if a knight gets any money, then they'll have to spend it for a new sword, for a party, because on the following year there'll be another harvest. Farmers will bring money to knights, and they don't have to care about that. While in folk stories, merchants are always mean, and they try to save the money because their future depends on that. It dates back to Harrison Lightson from Scotland, and that's one of the main tension line in the transition from feudalism to capitalism. So in our country now, a part of the elite, specifically the one that is connected with security agencies, they think of themselves as knights or warriors, because oil and gas revenues are rentals that look very much like rentals of a feudal lord, taking that rent from his serfs. But part of the elite, it's not only private business, is supposed to address infrastructural tasks, build roads, highways, maintain hospitals, healthcare, and they really count every ruble they have from the budget, and they are really concerned with the rising number of problems. So there is some tension among the elites. But today there are more factors that consolidate the elites than those factors that separate them. Nice. I like it. Who is there at the window, please? I'm Anton from Krasnoyarsk region. You pointed out that modernization through the modernization of the defense industry leads to nowhere. But my question is about the dual-purpose technologies. Did I say that? You said that, at least that's what I got from you. I don't remember me saying. I said that authoritarian modernization leads to nowhere. But that's different. Authoritarian modernization is a modernization through authoritarian means. I welcome brief questions. The one from Khabarovsk. Brief questions, brief answers. I'm Vasily Kropotkin from Khabarovsk. Today I was also shocked when I saw the initiative from so-called independent journalists, 6 from Khabarovsk and some more from the Russian Far East. They proposed Vladimir Putin is awarded the Hero of Russia for acquiring the Crimea, and they sent their requests to the Council of Federation and to the State Duma. How would you comment on that? When I heard your first phrase, I thought probably I would not comment on that, but with your continuation about the freedom of speech, I would respond to that. Freedom of speech is recorded in the Constitution, and President Putin, while taking the oath, made an obligation to respect the Constitution. So he took the oath, and he will have to behave along those lines. And in his capacity, he acted just in a standard way, and standard activities are not awarded with top medals. We have a lawyer's comment. According to the Constitution, all awards and orders are awarded by the President himself. So it would happen that the President himself will have to award him the top award of the Russian Federation. Do you mean that this initiative is to be stopped? 100 years ago, there was a similar situation, and the Duma of the soldiers and officers who had been awarded with the St. George Cross had asked the Tsar to award himself with the Georgian Cross. So it's pluralism. It can be both ways. Martina Kwiatkowska, the floor is yours, please. I am Martina Kwiatkowska from Poland. First, I was about to say that things were getting more and more horrible. Now I would say that things are getting more funny and funnier. Do you mean that statement by Lech Walesa? That's about the general situation. I wonder if there is any difference between the Russian words leader and vozhd, leader and chieftain. And how would you describe the current status of Vladimir Vladimirovich? Thank you very much for helping me to find an answer to the rhetoric question of Lena of what's positive. Positive things are that while nation can make fun of themselves, you can be confident that we will survive. Philology and philological topic can be quite interesting. Used my fingers, I can explain to you like this. Leader and chieftain may be the same, but chieftain is something that is genuinely Russian. And it doesn't suggest that there will be a democratic leadership, and it is associated with obsolete contexts of the past. So when differences are to be emphasized, we use the foreign word leader that was borrowed in the Russian language. But having said that, for Western philosophical tradition, the notion of leader or leadership That's a notion that is much broader. It not necessarily should be charismatic. They should not necessarily be leaders and those who are led. While in the Russian social circles, that notion is absent at all. If you ask an average Russian to explain to you what it is, they would fail. In 2007, there was an idea of all-nation leader. I was gaining popularity, and but that was the way to address the problem of continuity of power. It was just a way or an option to circumvent the limitation of 2 terms in power. You please sit in behind Timothy. Thank you. I'm Vadim Karaman from Tambov region. First of all, I would like to thank you for a wonderful lecture, and you explained us in every detail the principle of the split of the elites when some people come to the streets and say that the king is naked. Could you think of any facts, other facts of such a split? There could be multiple splits between elites based on various factors. And just let us see how many revolutions, coup d'etats we saw in the history of the mankind, and it was not based on the split of elites. My point was that the split of elites is something that is mandatory while societies become more sophisticated, and when there are too many interests, there should be opportunities for the elites to split and learn how to coordinate their interests in a civilized way. I would like to quote Anatoly Chubais of the late 1990s. What is bad is not oligarchs. The bad thing is that we have only 10, not 1,000, because 10 oligarchs can come to terms how to divide the approach to the president and resources, while the 1,000 of oligarchs would fail so because the crowd would be too great. So if there were 1,000 of oligarchs, then they would have to sit together and write rules how you can crush ones and how you cannot crush others, and then those splits between elites will evolve as the choice between Grand Old Party and the Democrats in the United States. Okay, we do need some conservative infusion. I was about to ask a question, but following your comment on the Crimea, I want to get a clarification. You said that the citizens of the Crimea would never vote for live in Russia. They will not be allowed to do vote, so no, I think that the majority of the population of Crimea are quite sincere to be part of Russia, and they will be sincerely happy about their Russian citizenship. Sorry, I cannot share their joy. I told about them. I didn't say anything about my opinion. Then comes the question, is my understanding correct that we are in the phase of the development of society that has cemented itself quite successfully, and now we are very fastly moving ahead to impose another Iron Curtain and develop our democracy here in a Russian way? Speaking of the Crimea again, there is a joke. It used to be a joke I liked. There is a rally in the Crimea about the referendum to join to the country where there is a great problem with taken meetings and rallies and referendum. But that joke does not abolish my earlier statement that they expressed their genuine desires to be part of Russia. You said that Russian society had cemented itself, had locked itself. Yes, partially it is to blame that the people allowed the power to cement them again. 2 years ago, there were signs that the society was awakening. We are running out of time. But anyway, there was one of the reasons why middle class or the citizens, why they took to the streets, because that class is quite pragmatic and they can assess their behavior and their investments both in monetary terms and human terms. So they took to the street, they expressed their position, they saw that very little came of it. And pragmatics, if they do something and it doesn't work, they think they should do it in a different way. So they did it once, and I don't know when they'll try another way next time. And, the blame of the society for allowing to have been cemented was that they didn't use all the means to resist that action. Iron Curtain, the way it existed 60 years ago, cannot be revived. Russia has already integrated into the rest of the world, and the world is much more transparent than it used to be. So any attempts to simulate that Iron Curtain now will most likely fail and has much more risks to those who can make those attempts. Speaking of our special way in democracy, I think that for democracies in every country, their ways to democracy are unique. But because societies that are trying to become democratic are also unique and individual, and they have different starting points, benchmarks, every nation comes up with a unique model of democracy. As for the Russian model,
you might remember that we have there are people who repeat this phrase every day. All right, sovereign democracy, something that cannot we import democracy. Yes, we can't, we shouldn't, we mustn't. What happens next? What about the specific, unique Russian democracy, how different it is from, say, French, British or Indian? And what is this specific peculiarity? I've never heard a single answer, as many other ideologic or ideologies, the propaganda sheaths that does not seem to have a sword. So I'd be very happy if you could impart to me this information. Our time is up, but let me tell you that we are always very thankful to Boris for coming to attend our seminars, and this is indeed a very, very precious. They're on my way. He has been our friend for years, from the beginning of this school. He's one of the most prominent Russian political scientists. His texts are published online and offline, as it is fashionable to say now. In any event, thank you. And enjoy your supper. We'll resume in an hour.
Хорошо. Писал теорию, разработал модель. Сейчас мне хотелось бы узнать какой-нибудь фидбэк хотя бы от наших некоторых специалистов. У вас будет время хотя бы ознакомиться.